Daniel Gillman here with College.town at the 2026 NCAA Convention in Washington, D.C. So pleased to be joined by Lynda Tealer, the Senior VP of Championships with the NCAA. Lynda, thanks for joining me. It's been a year for you now. I'd love to get a wide look at the depths that you've had to take. You talked last year with us about the 30,000-foot view. Where have you been in the last year and kind of what have you learned?
So I'm doubling down on the quality of the championship staff. This is just a group of people that cares about student athletes. They care about student athlete success. They work all year long to deliver this really great product. And so that was reinforced over the course of the year. And then you just really see the institutional commitment to championships. Often we'll talk about championships at the end, the final site, but so many rounds of championship events at divisions 1, 2, and 3 occur on campus. And so you have campuses and their staffs committed to providing excellent opportunity, excellent experience. And so what I've seen really in terms of breadth, the number of institutions involved, the number of operations and ticketing staff and field staff, the number of site reps who do this as they volunteer to show up at a site and represent the NCAA. So it is more than just what is happening at the national office. It really is across the country, all 3 divisions, people really pitching into the championship effort. And it's been fun to watch.
What you do is so undervalued, covering nearly 100 different championships throughout the year. But how have the NCAA governance structures, the change in it, impacted your area of the field?
Yeah, so one of the things I think is that's a great outgrowth of the change is that for every sport, for the most part, they have now a sport oversight committee. So it's a group of folks that not only manages the championship, but also the regulatory issues and the policy issues around each sport. So the goal really is that a particular sport oversight committee can take a step back, not just run a championship, though that's a heavy lift, but what are the things that impact the sport? They can really sort of be the steward for that particular sport at the collegiate level on a national scale. And it's empowered these folks to really take broad looks at the health of particular sports, how to make them sort of grow or support what people are doing on campus and in conferences. So it's really empowered folks to really own the sport that they are most closely involved with.
What was something in the beginning of your tenure, you started May last year, that you felt was so difficult that now you look back and you're like, oh, this is a breeze when it comes to covering a championship?
Yeah, so some of it is just recognizing that just how vast the NCAA sort of structure is, where, when you're on campus, you're dealing with your 18 to 35 sports, and you know those coaches and you know those student athletes, and that's what you're doing. This is obviously just the scope is broader and the reach is broader. So for me, it's just trying to help maybe coordinate and make sure various groups are all talking about the right issues across sports, between genders. So there's been a lot of learning in that. Obviously, I don't do that by myself. We have a whole staff of people, and we've organized ourselves in the championships area to really better deal with the various aspects of championships from an operations standpoint, a revenue generation standpoint, a governance standpoint, hopefully deliver a really good service to the members.
Now, there's a different committee that is creating a new championship when you have a new sport. What's that handoff like when you added a sport like wrestling last year, when they create the championship and then hand it off to your team?
Yeah, so it's exciting, and it creates, really it's an opportunity to start something from scratch. So, when you have a sport like women's wrestling, that has been around for a long time. It's just been run outside of the NCAA governance structure. So going and visiting with organizations and institutions that have been operating in women's wrestling for a long time. How should we run this championship? What's the structure? How many regions? How do you qualify? What's the right number of athletes to participate in the championship? So unlike when you've been doing a thing for a while, when you start a sport, you're really reliant on the groups and entities that have been working in this space for a long time. And again, women's wrestling is a great example because there's lots of women's wrestlers have already been competing, and there's whole organizations committed to that. So we're tapping into their knowledge and expertise to help us organize and deliver a really quality championship.
Well, I want to dive a little bit more into the weeds here because women's wrestling had just one overwhelming championship. And now we're voting on this week to have division-specific championships for women's wrestling and women's bowling. Does your job change when you have to cover multiple divisions in a championship versus having that specific D1, D2, D3?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So the job doesn't change, but it does mean now that you're going to have to stand up another committee, right? So when you have a National Collegiate Bowling Committee, they dealt with one championship. Now we're going to create a Division II bowling committee, and the other committee will remain. Same with wrestling. If Division III wrestling is approved, there'll be a separate Division III wrestling committee. So it's more, you don't have to start from scratch, but you do have to create a new committee, a new site selection, deliver a new championship, even though it's very similar to what you've been doing.
And I imagine for the student athletes, feels like a win to have that split as opposed to having a D3 student athlete competing against a D1.
Yeah.
Now you have more champions and there's no downside.
You know what? It's interesting. I think the perspective is either it's fantastic to say you Division III student athlete are going to line up and you can line up against a Division II athlete and a Division I athlete, and there's a lot of really good in there. There's also this sort of coalescing around, we love the division we compete in, and we want to continue to compete against those in like institutions. So it probably cuts both ways. For us, it's more opportunity, and that's the bottom line. That's a good thing. More opportunities for more student athletes to compete in and win championships.
Having been a part of the last 4 or 5 women's volleyball championships, having been to the Women's College World Series, I've seen the growth that women's sports has had. But what do you think, I guess, the impact of the emerging sports for women's program has really had? Because now this week, again, we're going to vote on the stunt and acrobatics and tumbling, and just seeing the growth that other sports, unlike the extreme ESPN popularity ones, can continue to see.
Yeah, but I think for each of those emerging sports, they can point back to when women's volleyball or soccer or softball probably has sort of the newest tenure, where it started and where it's ended up. And I think every sport that comes online can see that trajectory and feel like, our sport can achieve that as well. We can get it in the high schools, we can get it in the club level, we can grow it at the collegiate level, and then have this whole ecosystem around this sport. So it's adding a sport is both a sort of a recognition of work that's already been done, but also this really cool opportunity to create a whole new trajectory, a whole new kind of fan base and excitement, and bring something new to the table.
Pivoting here, Lynda, into positions that you've added, and having that role and having that responsibility is obviously a large one. So I'm curious to hear about the revenue generation, the policy and governance positions, the higher level positions that you've added. What does that bring to the table?
So it is super supportive for me because it means that we have experts in those areas. So we've organized ourselves so we have a vice president who oversees championships operations. So that's all of the things entailed with delivering excellent championships. The revenue generation and business affairs, we have now a vice president who can solely focus on those areas and get more depth and more insight than I ever could with various responsibilities. And then we have a vice president who oversees governance and policy. And particularly with the change in the governance structure where you have these multiple oversight committees, there's a lot of information to keep track of, a lot of movement and policies to keep track of. And now we have someone who's solely dedicated on that, helps us direct all the traffic, keeps the trains on schedule. I think again, in big picture, this is all making the operation run better because it's something that it's not my expertise. I'm not capable of it. So, good leaders, what they do is they surround themselves with people who are really, really talented and really, really good. So I've been fortunate to be able to do that.
Well, luckily we have you to be the talk piece to get our knowledge about it. And so carrying that, something that a lot of people were curious about this last year was the FCS Football Championship. And to move from a noon start in a smaller stadium in Frisco to a prime time kickoff in a bigger stadium in a little bit more of a draw of a city in Nashville, Where does the timeline start for that decision-making process?
Yeah, so this is a great example of like teamwork makes the dream work, right? So this is, we understood that Frisco was going to undergo a renovation, which is what was the, sort of the impetus for needing to look for another site. And you know what, in credit to the folks in Nashville, they took up the mantle, they wanted the event, they rolled out the red carpet. They really treated this. I think often FCS will say like they'd like their championship to feel like a bowl game, and it 100% did, like without a doubt. All the really special touches, they just did a fantastic job. The fans were really excited about going to and seeing a different location and experiencing all that there was to experience in Nashville. And then internally, I mean, we had people who really just put in the work to identify a new location and get a group that hadn't run an FCS championship game, run lots of football games, but not this particular game, up to speed, covered all the bases, did all the work. And then really our partners at ESPN, credit to them with this window to air the football game. It drove viewership, created a lot of buzz. I think it demonstrated the importance of FCS football. Nationally, it demonstrated the importance of FCS football to ESPN and the NCAA. So all told, it was just really successful. I think it showcased FCS football. And also, again, was just a real demonstration of how important FCS football is to the NCAA.
And that relationship, it was the third largest TV audience for an FCS Football Championship, carries me into my last couple questions here, because as a broadcaster that covers women's volleyball, there was a major change made in this last championship cycle, and TV is obviously always going to be the deciding factor for decisions. But I'm curious what the behind the scenes looked like for this year's NCAA volleyball tournament. Instead of having preset times for the first match of the night and the second match of the night, it was almost a week of decision to change it into 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after, I should say.
Right.
So that fans can be in their seats, and also, I'm sure, that TV viewership. Now, the question is, it wasn't linear broadcasting. All of the matches were kind of on ESPN+. So moving forward, is that kind of a test to see if the first two rounds of the volleyball tournament can get onto linear for ESPN? What's the story there?
Yeah, there are probably many dimensions to that. So one was this idea to not have these giant gaps between the matches, that you would treat it as a regional, right? So you'd have one match right after another. Lots of our sports operate in that way. And to encourage fans to, like, these matches, both of them are significant. So come, get in your seat, watch the last, set or two of the match before, stay for your match. It kept sort of the flow of, so you didn't have to have a lot of fill between the two matches. And again, sort of prepping for what's next. Can we operate in this way? Will fans buy in? Can coaches adapt? Can teams adapt? And then we go to the next, when these are all on linear television, let's hope, right, that we've already sort of established how this is going to flow.
Is there any sort of coach committee that is being asked decisions like this from any sport when it comes to championships, or does ESPN kind of have a liaison that says, hey, we think this is best for us, and then you or someone with your department says, yes, I will move forward with this decision, or are there coaches that are being asked the questions of how that works?
So this goes back to our sport oversight committee, and again, they're really charged not only with the governance piece, but also the championship piece. So they were heavily involved in that decision, as well as partner, ESPN, we refer to them as partners, and they truly are. So, a liaison from ESPN works with the committee. What can we do? What's going to work best? What's going to drive viewership? What's going to drive excitement, enthusiasm? What's going to build for the next thing? So I would say it was really collaborative, but it is the Volleyball Sport Oversight Committee that led the charge there and was amenable to making the change.
And then last question for you, Lynda. With Olympic sports and the pipeline from the NCAA to the Olympics, with the Olympics in America coming up in a few years, where does the, priorities lie for the NCAA with championships and all of that moving forward over the next few years? What are you seeing in terms of the growth of the Olympic sports?
Yeah, so an exciting time. And, there's a lot of, we try to work very closely with the US OPC they have their mission and their goals, and we have ours, but there's a lot of ways that we can sort of connect and collaborate, and we try to work as closely as we can. There's a great partnership, and it doesn't come out of the championships office. It really comes out of our communications department with the Olympians Made Here project, where, as you're watching the games, you understand that particular athlete, where they went to school, who they competed for, really tying back that institutional growth and development and coaching that happens on a college campus and then produces Olympians that then win medals for the U.S. And so really trying to highlight that connection. And for us, it's continuing to put on really excellent championships that prepare student athletes for international and Olympic competition.
Lynda, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it's my pleasure.